Secretary Noem, at the start of this hearing, you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth. Then you sat down and dodged the truth over and over and over. So you did not tell the truth to this committee.
Kristi Noem just got hit with a perjury bombshell in her latest Senate hearing, and I believe it was one of the most uncomfortable things I've seen in politics lately. You're the Homeland Security Secretary, and you're getting cornered with receipts that suggest you might have lied under oath. I think that's the kind of stain you don't wash off.
Beyond your false testimony about the administration's deportation policies, you falsely stated that the administration is focused on a full range of DSH's missions.
And when Benny Thompson came in with those two deadly questions, that's when we knew the polished, picture-perfect act was officially over.
The Trump administration is hell-bent on destroying the Department of Homeland Security built through bipartisan collaboration. Now, there's nothing in writing as a guidepost.
If you've been following the long line of Trump-era officials being dragged into hearings lately, you won't be surprised to hear that Kristi Noem just got her turn. Yes, the woman currently running Homeland Security was called in front of a House committee, and this wasn't the kind of meeting where you show up, wave, and leave.
Let's start with what the administration is doing to FEMA.
The list of topics waiting for her was enough to make anyone sweat. FEMA's future, the treatment of people detained by immigration authorities, and the very real possibility that she might have made false statements under oath.
Madam Secretary, you said that you want to get rid of FEMA, and the administration plan is to shirk its disaster response obligation and leave state and local governments to fend for themselves.
Yes, it was Benny Thompson's opening statement, and he is the committee's ranking member. His job was clearly to cut through any political polish and get real answers, and believe me, he did it just perfectly.
Emergency managers across the country are sounding the alarm about the limited ability to respond when disasters strike.
The hearing had been hyped for days as one of those moments where a politician either proves they can handle the truth or falls apart under the weight of it. Thompson started with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
What is the administration's plan to respond to catastrophic disasters beyond shifting responsibilities to states and local communities?
For anyone who doesn't live and breathe U.S. politics, FEMA is basically the country's safety net when disaster strikes. Floods, hurricanes, wildfires. When a state can't handle it alone, FEMA steps in with money, supplies, and boots on the ground.
President Trump has been very clear that he believes that FEMA should be eliminated as it exists today.
It's not just some desk job agency. It's the difference between people getting help in days or waiting for weeks while the damage piles up.
He believes there's dramatic reforms that need to happen to the agency in order for it to truly serve people in a time of crisis. He wants to empower states and local governments to respond to their people. The federal government would be there for resources.
Thompson's concern was that under Trump's direction, FEMA was quietly being stripped down, with more of its work dumped onto individual states.
Empower those locally to respond to their people because they know what they need. That is something that every state is at a different position today to respond, but he wants to give them.
Noem tried to sell it as empowering states, painting a picture where local governments had more control. But there's a big gap between an inspiring slogan and a working plan, and Thompson went straight for that gap. He asked her flat out if there was an official written plan for this major change.
You're the secretary, and you say you're doing all these things, and I'm just asking you, do you have a written plan for what you're doing?
There is no formalized final plan for how this goes forward because the input of Congress is...
That's when it got awkward. Noem admitted there was no finalized plan, no formal guide, no timeline, nothing for the public or Congress to see. And this wasn't some hypothetical problem.
Washington State, Mississippi, and a couple other states already have requests in to you or to the president for disaster declaration, and it's taken an inordinate amount of time, more than normal.
And wow, what a point that was, Benny. He straightforwardly asked states like Washington and Mississippi were already waiting far longer than normal for federal disaster aid. People weren't just waiting for paperwork. They were waiting for clean water, emergency housing, and recovery teams. So, where are the teams now?
It's based on some plan that you have knowledge of. But if it's not in writing, I understand. So you talked about the rule of law. Are you telling the committee that due process for anybody that's picked up in this country should not be followed?
Benny Thompson didn't waste time easing into the next round of questioning. After pressing Kristi Noem on FEMA, he pivoted straight to immigration enforcement specifically, whether every single person detained by ICE under her watch had received the full constitutional due process they were entitled to.
Your testimony to this committee under oath is that everybody that ICE has picked up in this country has been given every opportunity as Section 5 under the Constitution provides.
The words full constitutional due process weren't tossed in for decoration. Under the 5th and 14th Amendments, due process means that no person, citizen or not, can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without a fair procedure. That includes proper notice of charges, access to legal counsel, and the opportunity to have their case heard in court.
Everybody has gotten due process, and every person has been treated appropriately according to the civil or the criminal action to which they were encountering individuals and brought into our detainment and then also removed from this country.
Noem's answer didn't start with a simple yes or no. Instead, she slipped into legal jargon, talking about the tools Congress gave us, and specifically mentioning expedited removal. That's a procedure authorized by the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1996, allowing DHS to deport certain undocumented immigrants without a hearing before an immigration judge if they've been in the U.S. less than 2 years and are found within 100 miles of the border. It's fast, it's efficient for the government, but it is not, by any legal stretch, the same as full due process.
I just need a yes or no.
Sir, that is the due process tool that you have given us to utilize that has been appropriately.
Thompson clearly knew this. His question was a setup, and Noem walked right into it. He asked again, more pointedly this time, if her testimony under oath was that every single person picked up by ICE had been given their full constitutional protections. She still refused to give a direct yes or no, circling back to her earlier phrasing and leaning on the processes Congress has given us.
Secretary Noem, at the start of this hearing, you stood here and took an oath to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
That was the trap. Expedited removal has been repeatedly challenged in federal courts for denying people a meaningful chance to contest their deportation, and in some cases, even U.S. citizens have been mistakenly deported under it. Cases documented as recently as 2019 in a Government Accountability Office report.
Then you sat down and dodged the truth over and over and over for a little more than 3 hours.
If Noem's answer implied expedited removal, satisfies constitutional due process, and evidence later shows detainees were denied hearings or legal representation, that's not just a bad headline. It's a potential false statement under oath. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1621, perjury before Congress carries up to 5 years in prison.
You and the Department of Homeland Security will follow the Constitution, the laws, and the order of the Supreme Court. Well, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution says that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process.
And Thompson didn't have to spell any of that out in the room. The subtext was clear to anyone who's watched these hearings long enough. This wasn't just policy disagreement territory anymore. This was laying the groundwork for a perjury referral if her testimony didn't match the paper trail.
And yet, a federal court found that the Department of Homeland Security, under your watch, believes that it has a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process.
From there, the hearing moved into even more dangerous territory for Noem, the subject of habeas corpus. The trigger came from a statement made by a White House deputy chief of staff the week before, saying the Trump administration was actively looking at suspending habeas corpus.
To this committee today, when you said you would follow the Constitution and comply with due process.
That's the centuries-old legal principle requiring the government to provide a valid reason for detaining someone, enshrined in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. The U.S. hasn't suspended habeas corpus since the Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln did it in 1861, and even then, Congress retroactively approved it in 1863.
But you just testified before this committee that Kilmar Garcia will never return to the United States.
When the senator, a member of the committee, asked Noem to clarify her position, she didn't just sidestep, she misdefined it entirely. She told the room that habeas corpus was a constitutional right, that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their rights.
So you didn't tell the truth to this committee again when you said that you comply with court orders and decisions.
That answer wasn't just wrong, it was upside down. The senator immediately cut her off and corrected her, explaining that habeas corpus protects the public from exactly that kind of unchecked power. Without it, the government could throw anyone, including American citizens, into detention indefinitely without explanation, the hallmark of authoritarian states like North Korea.
But you produced no evidence that the mother, let alone both parents, of those children freely gave consent to have their children deported from the United States.
Noem then said she supports habeas corpus, but followed it with the claim that the president has the authority to suspend it. That conveniently left out the key constitutional requirement. Only Congress can approve such a suspension, and only in cases of rebellion or invasion when public safety may require it. There was no rebellion, no invasion, just an administration exploring how to bypass one of the oldest safeguards in the American legal system.
Did not want their children, especially their sick American children, deported. In fact, your agency lured families to ICE appointments under false pretenses.
The senator then moved to what he called his simple question. If the president attempted to suspend habeas corpus and a federal court reversed that order, would she comply with the court? Noem answered that DHS is following all federal court orders, as is the president. On paper, that sounds like a commitment.
False testimony about the administration's deportation policies. You falsely stated that the administration is focused on a full range of DSH's missions.
In reality, it's a minefield. There are documented cases, like the 2018 order from a federal judge in Washington, D.C., requiring the government to return wrongly deported asylum seekers, where the Trump administration delayed compliance or outright resisted court orders. The ACLU's 2020 filings in multiple jurisdictions detail repeated non-compliance in immigration cases, which makes Noem's blanket statement questionable at best.
Every American that we do not know how many people are left at FEMA to respond to disasters, and how many cyber defenders still work at CISA as China and other adversaries.
If she was aware of those instances and still testified under oath that the president was complying with all court orders, that's another possible false statement. Lying in that context isn't just political theater, it's actionable. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, making materially false statements to Congress, even without a formal perjury charge, is a federal crime. By this point in the exchange, Noem wasn't just defending policy choices, she was defending statements that could be measured against documented facts. Thompson's earlier FEMA questions had hinted at credibility issues, but the ICE due process answers and habeas corpus missteps were sharper, more precise. Now you tell me, after watching her twist, dodge, and stumble through that brutal questioning, does Kristi Noem have any credibility left? I'm not convinced. Let me know what you think in the comments.